Welcome to Pros and Cons, a podcast by writers for writers, brought to you by Precipice Fiction. Precipice Fiction would like to acknowledge the people of the Eora and Durag nations as the original custodians and storytellers of the land this podcast was created on.
Okay. We can cut that okay. Or we could leave it in. Welcome everyone to Pros and Cons, a podcast by emerging writers for emerging writers, because sometimes we all here feel like absolute pros, and sometimes, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on your state of mind, we feel like a con. And yeah, here we are. We're back again, and we have Kasi pseudo full house. We have Allie Burnham here.
Hello.
Matan.
Hey.
We got Paddy.
Hello.
And back with us again, we got James Healy in the house.
Hello, how's it going?
And Allie Burnham back in the house. It's been a while for Allie as well.
It has been a while. I've been doing a lot of teaching recently, 3 weeks in a row, and then I went out to Broken Hill. So very, very rude of me to not be around for the podcasts.
Ugh.
Allie, are you hiding something in Broken Hill?
Am I hiding something under
Is
the
there a
ground?
reason you
Something of
keep
value?
frequenting? Yeah.
It's semi-writing related.
Broken-
So I, through my work with Westwards, we run creative writing workshops for young people out in Broken Hill. This is my third time out, and essentially what we do is the students submit the short stories they work on during the workshops, and now I have between now and the Easter school holidays to produce a publication. We're actually going to do a physical print anthology of all the short stories they've been working on for the past 6 months. So it's
Nice
really
one.
cool. Get to come
That's
back
very
out with the
cool.
book and present them with the book, and we're going to throw a big
Mm.
launch party. They get to sit at tables and sign copies of the books, and all the big stakeholders from Broken Hill will be there, and their community, friends and family. So I'm really looking forward to, now we're at the culmination end, the celebration end of all the hard work.
Oh my gosh, that's beautiful.
That's a good reason. That's a good reason to go to Broken Hill. Yeah.
Yeah, you're forgiven for the podcast
For
misses.
not being here. Yeah.
No problem.
Thank you.
Oh, and I am Phoenix Rig, for all those that don't know. Yeah. And before we get into our topic today, which today we're talking about breaking a story. How do you break a story? And better yet, I guess, how do you avoid breaking a story? But it's more fun to talk about the actual shattering of these plot lines by accident or not by accident. It's more fun to take it from that angle. So that's how we're going to go. But before we do that, we're going to talk about some things we've been reading, watching, enjoying, whatever. Matan, we'll start with you.
So I'm about to finish Save the Cat by Blake Snyder, which is subtitled. Is that a subtitle? Is the second title the subtitle? Anyway, it says the last book on screenwriting that you'll ever need. Now, I'm not a screenwriter, so I didn't need one to begin with. But it's really... Oh, yeah, there we go. We got matching. Ali, I think it was a recommendation from you. So it's really great, even as someone who is not a screenwriter, because he really goes into depth about story structure, story archetypes, likable heroes. So I do take things with a grain of salt when it goes into things that feel very specific to movies, especially about movies' pace, because movies are really fast compared to books. But anyway,
Sometimes.
I really recommend it. You know what? If you're never going to write in your life, I still think it's worth a read, because it's cool, especially if you like movies. Which
I
True.
think there's some really cool takeaways, like even it's when it talks about opening and closing images and that being a reflection of each other. Like even if it's not an image in a novel, you still want whatever kind of your opening of your character arc to reflect the closing of your character arc, and make that as clear as possible on page one and your final page. Just really neat bookends like that, I think, are lessons that translate really well from screen to book.
Definitely.
Very cool. Paddy.
Elden Ring.
oh, Elden
Nice.
Ring. Like 5% of the audience will
Does
understand why I
the
did that.
game have an end, Paddy, or is it like a
Not that I've
sandbox?
discovered. No, it does have an end. It's just
Riding around looking for it.
Yeah, it's huge, and I'm
What's
taking
good-
my time with it. And it also,
Mm.
actually, this is very on point. Kind of broke the story for me at one point. I don't want to give any spoilers, but I
Whoa.
did a thing I wasn't supposed to do. I didn't know I wasn't supposed to do it. I don't feel it was telegraphed in the game, and it kind of broke the current storyline I was in. You embark on different
Mm.
narratives, and each one will give you like a different set ending to the game. So if you want a certain ending, you got to do a certain narrative. And I kind of locked myself out of this one ending, right? And I'm playing it for a story. I'm playing it to be immersed in a narrative, and it really upset me.
Yeah.
And I put the game
You
down
know
for like
what?
6 months because I was mad at it.
Ah, devastating.
Love that.
You know what, Paddy? I really want you to stream yourself playing, and I'd love to watch.
I would watch.
Personal
I think you
experience,
should.
though.
I
don't
think you
know. I mean,
should.
it's kind of you, but
I think you should.
If
I'm
you want.
really
If it's
feeling this game. I
personal,
don't
leave it.
We'll
yeah, I
we'll
think I
pressure you
might.
later privately.
There's other stuff I've been thinking about streaming for a while, but anyway, Elden Ring is absolutely incredible. I can't say enough about it, and it's got very unconventional storytelling. Maybe I'll touch on it again in the topic today. And rating House of Leaves, and that's me.
Elden Ring is the game I wish I wanted to play more, because it is. I touched it for a little bit and I was like, whoa, I can just feel the commitment of this story, but dang, it is, or the commitment of this game. I don't have that time, but dang, it is so beautiful and clearly so well done. But it's just like, I don't have the time to jump into this right now. And but
I'm limiting myself.
If I had an alternate reality stream or alternate reality parallel being that could do that for me, that would happen.
There's always
Anyway.
retirement.
The separate
That's
self
true.
that's always writing, and the separate self that's always gaming, and then the separate self that's
Yes.
doing the laundry. Yeah, wouldn't that be
But I-
nice?
Yes, not
I
for the
just
one
feel
that's
like
always
we'd all
writing.
fight it. We'll just fight each other. Like none of me would want to be the laundry me.
Yeah,
You know,
you get the
all-
story
all
where
of me
they
would want
kill
to
the
be-
others.
yeah.
Yeah, it's good.
Oh God.
James,
Quick, James.
what's what do you got going on, as well as can you introduce
So,
your dog
oh
friend,
yeah,
please?
Doggo here he's just a Doggo in the background here. I don't really have the backstory for Doggo. He's just he was here in the chair when I sat
That's
down. And I just didn't want to shift him. So you mean he looks more comfortable? He does look dead, but I'm pretty sure he's just happy.
For everyone just listening to the audio, this is not a real dog.
Oh yeah, sorry.
There are no dead dogs in the
There is
podcast.
a comfort dog in the chair beside me. Yeah, I just think he had a big night out, and I think he's just chilling out. He's the embodiment of how I feel right now. I just have to make words and speak. So
We're early Sunday morning in Australia, and I woke up and discovered there's no caffeine in the house, so I'm in a similar boat.
True.
Yeah.
I feel that that's tough. What I've been reading, I guess most prominently, I know that I mentioned in a previous podcast that I had listened to the audiobook of Memoirs of a Geisha up until the last couple of chapters. So
yeah.
a friend of mine who listens to the podcast sent me the book so that I could finish it over the Christmas.
That's so nice.
Yeah, it was
That's so fun.
pretty sweet. Terrible ending.
Immediate
God.
regret.
Really?
Yeah,
You
one
should
of
talk
those-
about that when we get into the main topic, actually, because that's
Hey,
Then I will, because it's one of the worst endings I've ever written ever.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
Huh.
So yeah, a heads up, spoilers for Memoirs of a Geisha, but also don't read it.
Or stop 2
and
chapters
these
from
have
the
been
end.
my memoirs.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
I think
And then it was over.
just the last 2 chapters blow the whole story. So yeah, I would just stop at
Ooh.
like
But now
chapter.
you made me want to read it, just so I can understand what's so wrong with it.
To be honest, great story. It's just it's a bit of a Deus Ex Machina, but a real slap in the face Deus Ex Machina. at the end.
Mm,
Yeah. So yeah, I might save it for the topic. Yeah, it's a good call.
Beautiful.
yeah. Deus Ex Machina, a good topic actually for what we're going to talk about.
Mm.
Yeah, we'll save that. Allie, jumping over to you.
Yeah, one I've been saving for a while. I actually saw this in December, but apparently I haven't been on a podcast since then. The Banshees of Inisherin I got to go to an
Oh,
advanced
yeah.
screening of that, so I was very excited. I got to see
Mm.
it before a lot of well, at least Australia did, and absolutely adored it. So Martin McDonagh is one of my favorite screenwriters, playwrights, and has been for a very long time. And the world gets blessed with a Martin McDonagh movie every 5 years or so, and this is the latest one, and it's currently getting all the accolades at the Golden Globes and Oscar noms and stuff.
Did he write In Bruges as well?
He did. So this is
Okay.
Martin McDonagh of In Bruges, Seven Psychopaths, 3 Billboards outside of Epping, Missouri.
Oh yeah,
I've
That's
heard of
this
that one.
guy. Yeah.
He definitely likes to use the same few actors.
Yes.
Again
So
and again,
you'll be
right?
able to
Yeah.
trace his use of actors, but also
Mm.
more just his
He did The
bleak,
Guard as well.
dark humor.
Mhm.
And
Mm.
Guard as
just
well, Ali. If you haven't seen that, you might really enjoy that.
which one? Sorry,
The Guard.
is that his brother? Not Martin
Oh.
himself. I think that's Martin's brother did The
Oops,
Guard,
yeah,
but obviously
right.
very similar
Yeah.
tone.
Hmm.
I'm like 95% sure of that, so worth googling if anyone
Yeah,
wants
yeah.
to
I
complain.
thought that was the same guy. Okay.
But I look, he's a masterclass in pace and tension, and foreshadowing. What I loved about Banshees, obviously I'm going to talk without spoilers, but the movie starts and he tells you exactly what's going to happen. So it's not a case of you watch it trying to work out what's going to happen. You watch it and he's like, this is going to happen. Therefore, you are strapped in for 2 hours, dreading the thing that is going to happen. It's such good foreshadowing. The question becomes, well, how is that going to play out?
Yeah.
There is a donkey introduced very on in the movie, and like 10 minutes, 15 minutes in, I'm like, this donkey is way too cute for a Martin McDonagh movie. Therefore, this donkey's gonna only have one ending.
Mm.
It's not long for this world, but the question doesn't become what will happen. It's like, how exactly and when is this going to happen to the donkey? And it's such a good tension tool. It's just this string that gets drawn all the way back. So I love it structurally for that. He's a masterclass in that kind of foreshadowing if you want to go check it out.
Ali, that sounds painful. Just waiting for an adorable donkey to get whacked. Like I don't know if I can do
painful.
that.
But it's been
Not a
so long
comfortable
since
watch.
I've sat in a movie theater just gripping the armrest where I'm just like, let it be over, do it. Like I'm just so engaged with every emotional beat of that. Like every scene, you're like, is this the scene? How is this scene going to unfold? And it's such a simple story. It's one location. Obviously, he comes from a playwriting background, so it's. I love how it just strips away everything else, all the bells and whistles we've come to expect with movies, and it's just like, here's a handful of characters with a handful of problems, and it's
what's it called?
The Banshees of Inisherin. Yeah, go check.
Really good name.
Yeah, he makes a joke that he just likes I sounds, so that's why it's called that. That's like a meta joke in the movie. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, you said I sounds, and I took it as like visual audio, and I was like, whoa, that's a very like what is it, kinesthetic idea. That's amazing. I'm into that.
The whole movie's a great eye sound, so I do recommend it. It's also very beautiful.
Well, I've just learned something about myself, something new about me. That's cool. I love eye sounds. That's now a new thing for me. For myself, I've still been reading Harry Potter and Frankenstein, and or Harry Potter in Spanish and then Frankenstein in English. I'm loving them both. I have not been doing a lot of reading like outside of editing other people's work. It's funny because it's like I feel like I don't do any reading, but in reality I read a lot. Like I'm reading constantly almost. It's just I'm reading other people's work. I've downed so many novels in this last year, but they're just not published novels, so I'm just reading from a different angle, and then I find it's hard to find time to read, but I want to read other work as well.
This might like go over everybody's head. Is anybody familiar with 9gag, the meme app 9gag? You know how there's
you just hurled me back into my 15-year-old self, Matan.
No,
I'm
just saying, because 9gag has like hot memes, which are the popular memes, trending memes, which are the on the way to become, and there's fresh, which is a hellhole of bad memes. you're basically browsing fresh as an editor because you're reading the unpublished stuff. You're browsing the fresh of literature, and you're helping the good stuff get to trending. That's it.
It's true. And there has been some good ones, and it's always amazing it's great when a good one comes in, because then I am like getting paid to just read a book. I'm like, oh, this is just a good book. This is very well done. And there are some that are they're a bit more rough, and that's a bit more like, ooh, I'm slogging through, but it's all good. I love it. But aside from reading, my partner and I literally just today finished Avatar the Last Airbender. It was my like fourth watch. Nice. It was my partner's first watch.
Ooh, very
good. Technically her second, but she miraculously, like to an extent I've never experienced, completely forgot what happened. I would bring up some
lucky
massive. It was great rewatching it, but like I would bring up some big details, like massive parts of the plot, and she just, and almost near the end, it was a joke. I'd bring it up knowing she wouldn't remember at all, and she'd be like, "Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about," and I'm like, "Wow." It was really fun rewatching it though. Just a fantastic show. And on that note, we're gonna dive in. So, breaking a story. What do we mean by breaking a story? I'll paint a picture for you. Okay, so we focus in on two characters. Let's call them Frodo and Sam. And let's say these two characters are walking through some desolate wasteland of a place. They haven't had water for so long. They haven't had food. Their lips are cracked. They're on this journey with a single focal point, a single vision keeping them going. And then they've fallen down, and they're like, "How do we? I don't think I could go on anymore, Sam." Let's say Frodo says that, and then Sam says, "Don't worry," and pulls out a magic wand and casts at a little rock on the ground and converts it into a beautiful shimmering cup of water and hands it to Frodo and says, "Drink up, Frodo. I'm a wizard, and we can make as much water as we want." That's the sound of glass shattering.
You just described the fanfic, basically.
Yeah, and that's something we could touch on today too. I actually have fan fiction in here.
Ooh.
But yeah, there's a lot we could talk about. But the point being here, why can't, as authors, there's nothing stopping us from writing physically any words we want on the page, and yet for some reason we can't do certain things because it would completely destroy the story for whatever reason. But there's nothing stopping any character from having magical, super fantastic powers or being able to do anything other than, does it mean anything, or does it suddenly make everything meaningless? And so it's a matter of building significance with your reader and continuing that through in a way that's satisfying versus pulling something out randomly in a way that doesn't mean anything and potentially makes the rest of the story feel cheap. And that's the foundation for this discussion. How do you break a story, and what does that look like? How do you then avoid breaking a story? So one thing I would like everyone to start thinking about now, and we'll come to it later because potentially it might need some thought. Can you think of a story or some example in some way where you were just absolutely pulled out of the plot and were suddenly aware of the book in your hands or aware of the TV in front of you? You were suddenly thrust out of the narrative and were just like, what? I don't know. So that's some homework to have in the back of your mind as we continue forward.
I actually have two examples already. One of them happens really at the end. Now, I apologize if I can't remember the name of the movie, but I think it's a Robert Pattinson movie called Remember Me. Does anyone that ring anything to anyone? Basically, you're watching a rom-com, and the last 5 minutes, you realize that the main guy is standing on one of the Twin Towers on the day of 9/11, and it just comes out of nowhere. And you're like, oh, wait, this is a 9/11 movie? I didn't realize. And it's so dramatic. It's so out of the blue. It just completely immersion breaking. One I remember a bit more clearly is Cloverfield Lane 10. which is honestly, I enjoyed the movie. It's a movie about a girl that is taken into a bunker by a guy, and the guy insists that she can't go out because the air is poison, and he basically locks her down in the bunker with him and another guy. He gets violent, kills the other guy. Anyway, the whole movie, you feel like you're watching this movie about this psychopath who's lying to this poor girl just for whatever he hopes to do to her. And then towards the end of the movie, spoiler alert, she walks out, and after killing the guy, by the way, and an alien ship comes out of nowhere and tries to kill her. A ship full of aliens. And it turns out that the guy was right. It isn't safe outside, just not for the reasons that we thought.
So it wasn't ever the poison air, it was aliens that weren't mentioned.
Yeah, aliens with tentacles. Yeah. Good movie, really. Good movie, but definitely plot breaking.
And that's part of the conversation as well, is because obviously things come in, because it can be used as a tool as well. You can pull randomness out or coincidence out or subversion out, but it's when does it become story breaking and when does it add to the story? At the end of Game of Thrones season 1, and they cut off Ned Stark's head. Whoa, sorry if you haven't seen that yet, but at this point it's on you. So why is that? Why does that make us angry because of the world and not angry because of the writers? Because it's like, that makes no sense. Like, what are they doing? Why is that subversion done well?
Well,
and yeah.
Did you want to finish that
Paddy.
thought before I... Okay. No, in Game of Thrones, you can be surprised in the moment that Ned Stark's head was cut off, but then given time to think about it, maybe as you're lying asleep at night, well, not asleep, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the episode, you're like, oh yeah, of course he had his head cut off. Actually, if I really think about that, everything was pointing towards it. There were all these warnings that Ned was in out of his depth. He was too good a person for this situation. He knew what the capital was. So shocking in the moment, yeah, but ultimately the text justifies it. It built up. Yeah. Whereas in Matan's aliens example, it sounds like there was no... I mean, a book, I think a lot of the time is like a puzzle almost, or like a thread that you can follow and work it out, and you can, like, everything makes sense. Like, there's a logical progression, even if it's not evident in the moment. But if something just comes out of left field, it almost feels like the author is cheating or breaking the contract. That's not satisfying. That's just
Game
a bunch
of
of
Thrones
stuff happening.
Is a good example for that, because I think a lot of those early big surprise twists are based on the book, which George spends a lot of time opening those brackets, in that by the time the big surprise happens, you look back on it and you're like, this was inevitable, like surprising but inevitable. This was the only way this could have unfolded because of all just the dominoes that were lined up and knocked over. But then when you get to the later seasons, written by the showrunners, one of the biggest complaints that came out of the big Daenerys kind of her character arc at the end is people like the dominoes weren't set up properly. This was surprising and shocking, which is what Game of Thrones was known for, but why does it feel different? And it didn't feel inevitable in the same way all the other big twists felt inevitable. It came out of nowhere. It didn't have the same groundwork laid.
Her suddenly becoming like an insane tyrant, is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, that's what I'm alluding to. Yeah,
not set up well enough.
I don't doubt the books will do it very well.
Yeah.
But the show didn't take the time to do it. It just went straight from X. Well, no, X is too far for this a metaphor. G to Z.
You're gonna feel bad for all the people that named their kids Khaleesi and then saw that last episode. That's going to be a kick in the teeth.
I think that's a lot of what goes wrong at the end of Stephen King novels as well. I think that he breaks his immersion a little bit by having endings feel like they've come slightly out of nowhere.
Space turtles,
just like random characters or stuff come up kind of at the end, and they end up being like the big bad and stuff like this that doesn't feel well set up. One of my all-time favorite Stephen King novels is Under the Dome, which is quite a bizarre little premise of just this small American town that finds itself one day encapsulated in a capsule, basically, where the bomb just comes down on top of the town, and the town is now cut off from the rest of America. And almost the entire story is based on the consequences and the social dynamics within the town that happen from this, kind of primarily based on an out-of-towner who ends up becoming kind of like the character who is blamed for all of the things that are going wrong, and this one character within the town who sort of becomes a bit of a tyrant. And it's really interesting social dynamics about how the tyrant sort of orchestrates a little bit of chaos and then uses that chaos to seize more power in the way that we kind of hear about in kind of society, where it's like, oh no, the enemies are attacking, we need to build up our home defense and stuff like this. So it follows along that really sensible kind of line of social politics and stuff like this, and you kind of follow the ins and outs of the characters all the way through, and then right at the end it becomes revealed that the dome, the reason that it's there, and I'm sorry, spoilers, it involves like extraterrestrials and stuff like this, and it's a totally out of left field just different element that's introduced into the story, and it just feels like, oh, I was really invested in what everything you'd done up until now. Now I don't know where to put my focus, and now this has become the aspect of the story that's going to cause the resolution.
It makes me think of a dramaturgy tool. It's more in the world of plays, but it's this idea that we talk about the world, quotation marks, but it's a bit of a thought experiment that you literally think of your story as a world. So like a blank sphere, and literally the only things that can exist on the blank sphere are the things you fill it with as the writer. So you name a single street, therefore your sphere is only a single street until you start building your world out. And it's just this great little way to visualize the world you're creating. Nothing exists outside it unless it's mentioned in the text. And I think that's fine, and it's really cute. It's a great way to think about story. But I think when your solution to your plot suddenly comes from a place that hasn't been built on your sphere, which sounds like exactly what you're describing, James, then it's that's what we mean by out of nowhere. Just trying to give it that out of nowhere phrase a bit more a concrete meaning, is you've been building your sphere, and then suddenly if your plot takes a turn, especially if it's a solution to your plot towards the end that hasn't been built on your sphere, that is a very literal way to throw your characters out of the world and the reader out of the world.
Feels like it also cheapens everything that came before it to a point. And part of the reasons why we get invested in stories is because we were expecting all these threads that we've invested time and energy and emotional energy into to have a payoff. If it suddenly goes to left field, you're left thinking like, but then why did I read all of these story threads? Like, what's the point?
Yeah.
I'm thinking Wheel of Time.
Why should we spend all this
The
time?
guy died. Give him a break.
He did, and that's really sad. But I mean, could he have wrapped it all up? And for anyone who hasn't read the series, it's a series that's kind of infamous now for incredible in the first 3 books, and there's like 12 books or something. Is that right? He introduces, yeah, there's a lot of books, so many threads and so many characters and so many different directions that every time a new one comes up, it's like, oh no, please go back to the original story, please, please, please. We just want to know what happens with these people. And he died.
It's George Martin. Our generation's Robert Jordan.
Well, he hasn't gone that far, but I think he has similar symptoms.
Yeah.
In that the same complaints of the later books, because book 4 and book 5 aren't one after the other. They are simultaneous. But this set of characters and this set of characters. And after a while, you're just like, wow, this story is going wide instead of going forward. And I think an audience finds that a little bit frustrating.
And so a lot of everyone's touching on very similar things. It's introducing stuff to your readers early on of significance that you want the reader's attention to be on, so that you can tell a story about those things. And that's kind of your contract with the reader. That's your agreement with the reader. And when things come out of nowhere, it's unsatisfying. And some people might think, I'm one of these people, when I first started thinking about this, is like, well, why as an author do I have to, I don't like, it's like when I think of contract, I think, well, that's limiting. Why? That's limiting my artistic creativity. But in the end, it comes down to, is it an interesting story or not? Yeah, you can put anything down. You could do anything you want. You're right. As an author, you can do anything you want. But is it an interesting story? And one way to think about it, kind of a story simplification that I like to think about, is if you came home one day and you walk into their house and you're like, Mom, you'll never guess what happened to me today. I have to tell you what happened to me today. And you launch into a story to try to convey or communicate some sort of significance to an event that took place, because let's say at the beginning you have to set up some context in order for the ending, the actual event that took place, to have meaning for your mom as it did for you. You have to give her focal points to focus on. It's important for you to know this person was there. It's important for you to know what this person meant to me. It's important for you to know what this person did 10 years ago, because today a blue car came out of nowhere. It's like, what? You haven't even been talking about a blue car. You've been trying to get me to understand this person. Now I don't understand the significance of this thing you've tried to communicate to me. And yeah, you're right. There's nothing saying you can't tell that story that you just told to your mom, but your mom's gonna not understand the significance of the event in the end. And is that satisfying for you as an author, to have your readers not understand what you were trying to communicate? And for me, no, it's not. I'm trying to communicate something that I think is cool. I'm trying to get the reader to be like, isn't this awesome? This is how it played out in my mind. And I'm trying to get you to understand that, because like, look at this world, look at these characters, look at this event. Isn't that awesome? And if all of them are like, I don't get what you meant with that one giant tree that did that thing at the end, then it's like, dang it. Like, it's kind of a waste of energy on a few different parts.
That's interesting that you say that, because I love the artistic instinct of I don't want to use tropes. I'm not going to use structure. It's just going to come out of me, and I'm going to celebrate how it comes out of me fully formed. And I think to a degree that's cool and worth celebrating, but also I think you need to set that up as then the promise of the work that you're delivering. So you, in the same way we're talking about bookending a promise at the start and delivering at the end, if then your promise is going to be, I am defying structural tropes, this is going to be a crazy ride, that's a promise you make at the start, and then the audience is set up, the trust is built, and they will go on that crazy ride with you. Maybe not the best example, but I am thinking of Everything Everywhere All at Once. The promise very early on is, you don't know what you're going to get from this, and then as an audience you're like, great, I don't know what I'm going to get from this, and that's the contract you're talking about. So rather than thinking of contracts as restrictive, just whatever the promise you make with the audience page one, and then now you've got your blank check. Now they will go on that ride with you if you've held their hand enough just at the start, and you're good to go.
Even that, though, circles back into a very satisfying conventional kind of story. All the craziness happens in the middle, but by the end you're like, oh, we're back where we started, and I could have predicted this. So even then it's following that kind of convention.
Yeah. An example of one that I feel that breaks that makes me really mad, and this might make some people mad. Matan, you might know it. Slow Regard for Silent Things. It's
yes,
Patrick Rothfuss's little novella. And I think where it comes from is because it's centered on a place who her character defies normal social conventions and laws. So she's an oddball character. So I can follow his logic in that he's like, because it's an oddball character, I'm going to write an oddball structure. And these two things are going to thematically represent themselves. And I'm like, intellectually, I'm there with you, Patrick Rothfuss. However, as a result, he's written the most boring piece of like several thousand words anyone could ever be subjected to. And it's really painful to get through this story because there's no structure.
But I'm so sorry. I'm so starved for anything, Rothfuss. I would read his shopping list, Rothfuss, if you're listening, if you publish your shopping
one
list,
of those for you, so you can.
$9, I will purchase the damn thing. I will purchase the audiobook. I will watch the Netflix adaptation. Just give me something.
So someone had to save the Rothfuss bashing, so that was a good shout out, Matan. But I think for me, the promise that's been broken is because the structure was so different to the world he's already established in his other two books, that he's like, this novella is a part of this world. And I'm like, woo, more of the same. Feels like the promise being made. And then you read it and you're like, this, like, I'll never get those hours of my life back, is kind of my knee-jerk reaction to that story. So something fundamentally was broken there for me.
It's a condemnation. I love it.
James, I'm still curious to know why Memoirs of a Geisha hit a brick wall at a high speed at the end of the book.
Yeah, Memoirs of a Geisha, and it's not entirely that it wasn't. It wasn't entirely that it wasn't set up in the story, but it definitely felt. I'll just give spoilers. So if you're reading Memoirs of a Geisha or intending to read Memoirs of a Geisha, maybe tune out for the next 2 or 3 minutes.
Wait. Okay. I'm just gonna shut down my.
Just mute.
No,
Yeah.
I'm joking. Go ahead.
So the character
Spoil me away.
essentially is the story of a young girl who becomes, I believe she becomes orphaned. She essentially gets sold into being a geisha. It's kind of like this. It's not quite the sex trade, but it's very adjacent to it. She's essentially a slave. She's no control over her life. She comes to a point towards the end where she's about to be married off to a companion, a friend who she's known quite well. They've survived World War II and all this, so she's not in a great place. She's not very happy about it. She's all had this infatuation with another gentleman, a powerful gentleman, kind of for the whole storyline. And the story is so well set up right at the ending to be a massive tragedy where she is within grasp of the life she wants, and all of the other characters are set up with their wants and desires, and they're just on the cusp of getting these things. And then this character makes some rash moves to try to get the life that she really wants because she doesn't want the life that she's about to have. And everything is set up perfectly for it to just come crashing down and be a massive tragedy, be really bleak and really depressing, which is what I obviously love in a story. And
Obviously.
then at the end, this attractive, wealthy benefactor who she's been infatuated with just approaches her and is like, oh yeah, no, I've actually been in love with you the whole time because you're so beautiful. You can come and be my side chick. So the ending is basically like, it's fine, you're incredibly hot, so don't worry about it. And I was like, oh, okay.
Side chick,
It's
the
kind of
book.
like even more depressing an ending than what I thought it was gonna be.
Pressing in the bad way.
Like, yeah, it's fine. It was fine the whole time because you were so beautiful. You could have just had it at the beginning. There was no need for any of the story because you're beautiful. So I was like, okay, bit of a Deus Ex Machina, bit of a everything's fine if you're incredibly if you are so beautiful that you inspire art, you'll be fine. But everyone else is fine, so don't worry about it. So I was like, oh, okay, it's a bit of a shit ending in my opinion. It was written by a man. I was like, okay, that makes sense.
you do say though that the guy, at least he's mentioned in the story. It's not like he's a completely out of left field character.
He doesn't appear out of nowhere, but they didn't really have. I guess there was no. It wasn't expressed that they had a relationship. It wasn't expressed that he was interested in her. He kind of expresses like, oh, I always pretended not to be interested in you for this reason. But the story also sets up that right at the end, it sets up that he is interested in someone else. So I was like, it's going to be so good if it turns out that he's just into her mate because her mate has a different personality, and it's just going to be like he's just going to go that way and she's going to go this way and her life's going to be ruined. And I was like, this is going to be such a good tragedy.
Are you just unhappy because she found happiness?
Yeah.
Did you long for a more tragic
hate
ending?
it when it works out okay for the characters.
I mean, at the end of the day, yeah, I mean, she won. Okay, she got the W. Maybe it wasn't well earned, but let's be happy for her, you know?
Yeah, we can be happy.
It's not easy.
We can do that. I do.
Let her have her
sad ending.
Let her have her side chick status with this reasonably sounding guy. Really, sounds like a really fine book.
Yeah, I mean, I guess.
Thanks for spoiling me. I don't think I'm going to read that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fairly. If you were going to read it, I'd read up until 2 chapters before the end, and then just stop, and then be like,
just bookmark me.
Terrible.
Give it to me with a bookmark, and I'll stop where you put it.
Now, if there were hints, maybe even subtle ones, that he was interested in her, and it turns out the reason he was interested in her was actually for some virtue that she's showing throughout the book, especially a virtue that she has, even though it's causing suffering to her, like a burdensome virtue. Do you think that would have changed? I mean, it's hard to know because you haven't read that book, but if that was the case, do you think that would have redeemed the book?
I 100% feel like if it was something she was in control of or something that she had actively done, that had gotten his attention,
Mm.
it would have felt different. But at the end of the day, because it wasn't through her actions that he came to her and told her this. At the end of the day, someone comes in from outside and gives her everything she needs, rather than it being as a result of her actions. I felt like the story set up her actions that they were going to work against her, basically. She kind of plots and she puts some stuff together, and that was kind of what the character was doing. She was a social character. She was moving, she was active within the story, and she was being dynamic, and it should have been as the result of her dynamic behavior that it worked out the other way. So it should have been, it has to be something that the character has done. I don't feel like you can have just some character drop in from out of nowhere and be like, oh, hi, I'm your wealthy aunt. Here's the solution to all your problems, and fix things. I feel like that's always going to be an unsatisfying ending. It's always going to feel like a written ending. It's just going to feel like, oh, we're at the end of the story now and we have to sum things up. Oh, by the way, there's treasure buried underneath your floorboard, kind of thing. That's basically what it felt like, because you have a character walk in and be like, by the way, did you know how beautiful you are? Here's all of the money.
I love it. I just love it.
We talk about that a little bit, especially in the lead up to publishing our anthology, The New Mythic, available now on Amazon. The idea of having a character that's active versus passive. So it's, I don't want to say always, but it's probably good practice to have a character that is there making influence on the world, and things, especially a protagonist, things in the world are happening because of their action, as opposed to a character who the world is just happening to them. They're not the active instigator of things in the story. I feel like that's connected to what you're saying.
I'm right in the middle of a
100%.
writer's room at the moment, and a phrase we keep tossing around is, have they earned their protagonist status? So we're right in the middle of creating these characters from nothing, and we have a few options on where it can go. And so like the story's just coming to life in front of us, and every time we get them to choose to do something, we're like, everyone in the room can sense that's the stronger choice, and we're like, great, with each choice they make, they're earning their protagonist status. This is why we've put this person in the center of this story engine, and it's just trying to get them to be as active as possible in their own creation, which is kind of cool. Sorry if this is a bit of a tangent, but I was trying to ask my brain if there's any other examples of ways stories get broken. You may have been circling to this, Phoenix, but this idea that working in fantasy a lot and genre, and I think even crime might run into this a little bit, but there's sometimes where as authors we need to insert weird little hints about the lore. Sometimes we need to put in clues that may seem out of place at the time, but it's a matter of, don't worry, it comes back later and it's going to be relevant. Yeah. And I know with a few of my beta reads, when I've tried to do this, they'll notice a sentence or things I've just put in at the top. And they're like, this feels out of place. You've thrown that. I've been thrown out of either the pacing, out of the world, and it's me as author. I have to be like, well, I need that in there because that's a key detail for later. But how can I either massage it in so it's either natural to the point where they don't see it, or actually, no, it's really important they see it. And it's actually important that they found that it's a bit weird. I need them to notice that it's odd because it's going to come back later. And a phrase to steal from Brandon Sanderson, he calls it hanging a lantern on it. So if there's something that seems out of place and the reader thinks it's a mistake, as an author, if you go in and make a bigger song and dance about it, if you literally hang a lantern on this odd thing, again, it's just creating the trust that then the reader, instead of thinking they've read something that's a mistake or bad writing, they go, oh, that's intentionally odd. That's intentionally out of place. I now feel smarter for having noticed it. So
that would be the characters like remarking on like, but that doesn't make any sense. Why is that a thing? Just so
that's
the author's like,
okay,
your instincts as a reader, you're not wrong. The characters know as well. Just
so as a reader, rather than being like, that was odd, but no one, as you said, no one else has reacted to it, so it feels like as a reader you've had an incongruent emotion, so you feel out of place. You just go, no, that was the right emotion. You just kind of reassure the reader, you're on the right path by that feeling weird and out of place.
Something that I'm thinking of is very prominent. I'm wondering if it's the same thing you're talking about. In the opening few chapters of George Martin's Game of Thrones, he has the phrase, and not like it's used like the others take them or the others damn them or something like that. The characters use it in the way that you might say, like, oh, the devil take them or the devil damn them, something like that. So that phrase can be,
Others take you. Yeah, something like that.
yeah. But then
Is it like to hell with it?
yeah, it's basically to hell with it. Basically, you're kind of like screwed, but it's used that way, which feels really out of place the first time you come across it. It doesn't make sense, and you're kind of like, what is that about? Then you see it again, and you're like, oh, this is obviously some kind of phrase within this society. Then you get the explanation of what the others are, and you connect it obviously back to the opening chapter where you kind of met them, but you didn't know that was what they were.
Yeah.
The same thing, or is
Sanderson is the king of that. Sanderson is the king of like getting phrases stuck in my brain. Like I would be shocked at something, I would mumble like blood of my ancestors, and my wife would look like, what the hell? Like, that's just it just really gets stuck. Or like storm you. No.
Yeah, I guess it just comes to a place of reassuring the audience that their instinct that it's out of place is correct, rather than they think they've read a mistake or something that's weird. Like this writer can't write because that stood out to me. It's fantasy's fun for this because sometimes we're writing magic systems where we have to set up the law and we're like, this is normal, this is status quo magic system, but plot happening over here is the out of place magic system, and that can be really tricky to find that balance because you need to get them all on board with status quo normal magic, and then but the magic system's now acting a little bit odd over here because plot is in this direction. Characters are going to discover something. So it's just, you really have to hold an audience's hand between normal magic nonsense and then this is, that's correct. You've correctly identified when the world building is broken because that the plot's in that direction, the magic source of whoever is in that direction, which is a little different to, it's funny we mentioned Save the Cat earlier because I believe he has a saying that's kind of like you only get one kind of hocus pocus. I gotta forget what he actually calls it. Do you remember?
I got it. It's the mumbo jumbo. It's the
mumbo jumbo. You only get mumbo jumbo. It's this.
But his example sucked. His example sucked. The example he gave is like Spider-Man is not a good movie because how come one guy gets superpower from radioactive spider and another guy gets superpower from the Green Goblin, whatever happens to him? I'm like, of course that makes sense.
I agree. This rule doesn't apply to fantasy. Essentially, what the rule is meant to say is you only kind of get one buyout. You get one suspension of disbelief. The audience is willing to be like, oh, that's one crazy rule. I will accept this and go on. But if you make it, there's now two crazy rules happening in this world, the reader goes, no, you've lost me. I'm out.
It's basically you're allowed one ass pull per story, basically. And even that ass pull better be good. Like you can only pull something out of your. Sorry for profanity. Do we have this tagged for profanity?
I tag every episode for explicit just in case. It's fine. It's fine. The audience knows what they're getting by this point.
You know how there's basically. I gotta say this, because we're talking magic systems. I think number one culprit of breaking a story in our genre is a magic system that's half-baked, and the writer just needs, he needs the magic system to do something for the plot because now the hero has to win or the villain has to win. It's kind of like this anime trope where, your ability is invincible, but I have the one ability that can defeat your invincible ability. And
the thing that I've been kind of wrapping my brain to, I'll get you finished. Sorry.
No, but that's basically it, because I'll be honest, when I start writing a project that has a magic system, I usually don't have the magic system figured out before I start writing. Ballsy. And I kind of hope I kind of figure it out as I go because I know I'm going to twist it according to my needs. But that doesn't mean that I have a lot of my work cut out for me on draft 2 because I do have to go back and iron that out. But that's just my 2 cents. Magic systems are risky.
I want to have an episode. I want to host an episode on magic systems alone. And honestly, I'd love to have an episode where we just talk about fight scenes. And why is one person allowed to win, and why is one person not allowed to win, and why is it interesting, and why is it significant, and why does it work for one person's punch to be stronger than the other person's punch? Because again, as an author, you can put anything, you can have the other person win, you could write that down on the paper, it doesn't matter. But why is one person's punch stronger? And that's so interesting from a plot point of view for me. James, I know you're about to say something, but I want to move us along a little bit. So one thing we've been talking about here is things coming out of nowhere. You're only allowed one ass pull, things like this. And one thing you could talk about is I've recently watched something. It was an analysis of Avatar the Last Airbender, and the person talks about a story tool called coincidence. You could call it a lot of different things. And but it's basically like, you know, when something happens and you're like, oh, well, that's convenient. Like, making that interesting, or why is that significant to the plot? Does it further the plot? Does it bail someone out of a situation? Does it add to the significance of the situation? Or does it, like in a magic system scenario, does it completely break all of the significant and emotional connection that you've tied to the rest of the magic system, that you've like, whoa, this is so cool, this is how it works, I understand it, and then suddenly an element's brought in that just erases all of that. And it's like, oh, well, okay, suddenly it means nothing. And so you're allowed to bring things in out of left field, and like, you know, that whole mumbo jumbo thing, you're allowed to have a bunch of different events. But like, coming back to the example of like, you walk into the house and you have to tell your mom about your day. Usually when you want to say something crazy happened in your life, it's because like one event happened. One coincidence took place that created a story around it. And then now you need to tell the story of that coincidence that took place. So if you're going to bring the reader's attention to multiple coincidences, you need to be able to tie them together in a way that makes sense. Otherwise, they feel like a bunch of different stories that are kind of running in together kind of oddly, and they kind of pull significance from the others. So you can do anything. It's the skill comes from, can you make it interesting, and can you make it significant, and can you communicate your significance to your reader? Because clearly it meant something to you and you had some significance there. And yeah, can you
I did love that. I once had it phrased to me that the audience loves coincidences that get characters into trouble, but hate coincidences that get characters out of trouble. We won't swallow that, but we love the first one.
Yeah.
Like if the character walks through the doorway and there's the detective right there that they're trying to avoid, and they're
love it.
Yeah.
Or the father of the girl you just cheated on just happens to be your parole officer. That's great.
Oh.
Ooh,
We haven't
Matan.
What?
That's just a good.
I'm not talking
juicy
from
plot he
experience.
pulled.
Yeah, that was interesting. I'm instantly
It's just like, oh, nice story.
Yeah.
I'm willing to cut this little part out, but I wanted to move things on to like language and prose and the way things are written. But James, did you want to get your point off first?
Oh yeah.
No, not really. I didn't really have an example. It's just when a story introduces rules and then breaks its rules. But I'm racking my brain trying to think of a good example, because I know I've had some recently, because I've been thinking about that specific thing and I can't remember what set it off. But you know, when like if a magic system is set up and then, oh, now this character is more powerful for random reasons, or like this is how the zombie plague is transmitted, and now suddenly it works in a different way, or something.
I want to say Harry Potter like gets really close to it.
Oh, wow, okay.
With the twin wands thing. It's like it is justified, but it's kind of late in the story to pull that out. Like first he couldn't touch him because of the magic, and now because of the wands he can't beat him. Does that make sense? That was close. For me personally as a reader, I was like, oh, there's another reason he can't kill him beyond the first one. Yeah.
This is a whole conversation of its own. But what were you? I want to jump into it. What were you going to say, Paddy?
One thing we haven't.
Yeah,
we haven't talked about how prose can also. I mean, everything. I don't know about everything, but a lot of things we're talking about here are when the reader no longer is willing to suspend all their disbelief and just be 100% with the story, you know, for whatever reason. And something that can do that is prose. I'm sure we've mentioned this on the podcast before, but people say of prose sometimes that I mean, you can always break this rule, but it shouldn't draw attention to itself. It should be telling the story, and the reader should just be there digesting the words, not aware that they're digesting the words, and just let the story happen. But as soon as they see something that we call it when we're in our editing process bumping, as soon as the part of the language bumps, then it's like, oh yeah, I'm reading words on a page. Like I'm actually in my bedroom, in my underwear. I'm not really reading a book. And that can be, for example, when a word happens in a sentence, and then in the next sentence, the very same word occurs. Not something like the or and, but like predicate or unbelievable or something like that. And so you're like, oh, I just saw that word a second time. That feels wrong. That feels languagey. And that's big. You want the language to be subtle and camouflaged, and just let also language that's too flowery and too descriptive. I mean, I'm guilty of that. Sometimes you're just like, I'm just reading I'm reading flowery poetry. This isn't just telling a story. And if you guys have any other examples of language breaking immersion,
always kills me.
Oh, you go ahead, Matt.
Always kills me when someone gets hurt in a book and they're describing exactly which bone it is that probably is cracked. Oh, like the fifth disc in my vertebra. Why do you know that? Do you have an X-ray in your what's happening here?
Shit like
a
that.
doctor wouldn't be able to tell you, oh, that was the fourth left side of my sixth. I don't know. You don't know that, man. Anyway, kills my immersion. James?
It's almost the opposite of what Paddy said, in that if it's too flowery, that can happen, but also if it's just bad, it can do the same thing. I was pulled out of, I couldn't finish the Expanse series.
Yeah, you mentioned.
Really, really, really good content, if you know what I mean. Beautiful imagery, really, really clever, really sensible stuff. But the prose, like the words on the page, were just so bland and boring that I couldn't get through it. I got maybe through the first quarter of the first book, and I came across the phrase "vomit zombie," which just referred.
Yeah. What?
People vomit zombie, which was
vomit zombie.
Fun to say.
It sounds like a death metal band.
Yeah.
Now you have my attention.
Well, what zombie. Was that people had been reanimated, dead bodies had been reanimated. They were causing chaos on this space station. They were spreading the disease by, I guess, vomiting onto other people and giving them the disease. And I'm on board with all of that, except the writing was then the vomit zombies came around the corner and XYZ, blah, blah, blah. One of the vomit zombies grabbed, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, why did you not just come up with a different phrase? Because it's painful to try to read. Absolute agony. And
it's like they
felt that way up until that point, and that was just a point where I was like, I can't deal with vomit zombies. The fact that you call them zombies is bad enough. The fact that you describing them based on the adjective of what they're predominantly doing.
It's funny because you're such a patient, kind man, and they cracked you. You know, exactly. They pushed you too far.
Yeah, it's like watching 28 Days Later and them being like, the running zombies are coming, or like something else. It's like, killing me. I can't stand this. So I had to tap out, which is a shame because they were really, really interesting. It was a really interesting. Just badly written.
I would love that.
The running zombies.
If they just appended running onto. Like, look out! It's like, why the running zombies? The running zombies. You could just say zombies. They're
yeah, it's like
the running zombies.
I know the blood disease zombies are coming. Why are we doing this? Really frustrating. Oh no, the light vampires are coming. Oh, the vampires that can come out in the day. Okay, I get it. All right. Come up with a cooler phrase.
That's pretty gross.
The night vampires. Yeah. That is such a waste of word space.
Full moon wolf coming.
Not the full moon wolf.
You know what? I just want, like, you know, these TikTok shorts. I just want shorts of James just mentioning all the possible iterations of like running zombies, full moon werewolves. I'll watch the shit out of that. Just keep going.
Yeah, that's good.
Phoenix.
Yeah, there you go.
Sorry,
Yes.
I was going to ask. Did we have any time left for us to mention other stories that had broken the world for us, or are we wrapping up?
Can I mention one more language thing? Can I mention one more language thing?
Okay, yes, we are coming near the end here, so we'll do one more language thing. We'll do story with Ali, and then we'll get to our quote. So
ambiguous descriptions or ambiguous prose. I don't know if you guys ever read Life of Pi. Really, really interesting book. There's a whole bunch of, I don't know if you remember this, they're on the lifeboat and the guy's trying to describe these complex sequences where the minutiae of what happens in each moment, the actions each character is taking is really important to the scene. And there were so many times where I was reading that and I had no idea what he was talking about. I didn't understand where each character was in relation to anyone else. I didn't understand the physical action. And I'm turning these pages thinking, I don't get it. I don't get why this is significant. Ambiguous descriptions are so bad at breaking immersion.
I read it, and one of my students actually chose this book as a book report, and I think I know what you mean. I think I know what you mean about just kind of letting go of the wheel, and just he kind of goes with it, and kind of expect you to catch on
a little bit.
All right, Allie, what was?
Yeah, it kind of
ties
into this. I tried to think of 3 examples we haven't quite touched on for ways stories break for us. And these are probably 3 quite subjective ones for me. Okay, so I'm coming for Patrick Rothfuss again. So I adored his first book, Name of the Wind. His second book, Wise Man's Fear, doesn't get held up quite as much. It's doing some other things. I think simply because he didn't spend the same amount of decades drafting it, it came out a little bit quicker. But for me, there's a few moments in Wise Man's Fear that we mentioned fan fiction before, where Wise Man's Fear starts to feel a little bit fan fiction-y for me. And what I mean by that is it starts to feel a little bit like an author insert, and suddenly I feel like I'm in the room with the author. And you know the section I'm talking about. But it feels like I'm in the room with the author instead of in the room with the story. And it's this
I didn't feel that.
Okay, well, good.
I'll let my thoughts stand, but
didn't you feel like it was like one of these movies that air at 3 a.m. and you'd watch it muted because you don't want your parents to know that you watch it?
It was less the explicit nature that I'm having a problem with, but just the wish fulfillment is what I mean by fan fiction. That I feel like when the author is too present on the page with me, and there's a veil that's been broken, and this is a criticism that gets thrown at YA female protagonists all the time, where people are like, oh, it's just a Mary Sue, why is this character good at everything? And I think they're talking about the same feeling of, well, now the author feels like this feels like someone wrote it because they wanted to fulfill a wish, rather than this is a story that exists to entertain an audience. So I got a little bit of that from Wise Man's Fear, and that it felt a little wish fulfilling. And that broke it for me. My other quick rapid fire mentions was, has anyone else read the Poppy War trilogy?
No.
So something that does is its whole mandate is it's going to break tropes. So it's going to set up tropes like high schools, like the fighter high school trope, like a bunch of your whole cast, your ensemble cast of kids are going to go to the school and learn how to fight. That kind of trope. So it sets up just lots of well-known YA tropes, and its whole thing is we're going to punish you for ever having enjoyed these tropes. So therefore all these kids are going to have a bad time. They're all at war, they're all going to die, they're going to have the worst time ever. So I can appreciate that, again, intellectually what that's doing, but this is a 3-book series that sets up a lot of fun setups that are like, look, there's fun magic systems where powerful things happen when certain 3 characters come together and this power is inherited. So I'm like, oh, I'm with you. As a reader, I'm like, you're going to pay that off by book 3, right? Where 3 people are going to come together and have the same power. They're going to inherit the same power in the way you set it up in book 1. And then because the whole mandate of this book is we're going to punish you for enjoying it, by book 3, none of these, it's like, haha, they're almost going to come together. Actually, no, all the characters are going to bail, they're all going to turn in each other, everyone's going to be miserable forever. And so it's intentionally diverting away from these tropes. And I'm like, cool thought experiment, but did anyone have a good time? I don't think anyone had a good time. Why did this exist? You set it up to break it, and everyone has there. Okay, so that's my main thing with Poppy War. I'm like, great intellectual writing, bad feels. As a reader, I got nothing out of it. And
Yep.
while I'm throwing famous authors under the bus, my third one was going to be J. Kristoff's Nevernight trilogy. In that I love Nevernight. I love the first one. Second one, serviceable, also entertaining. This weird thing happens in the third one where it turns out the whole trilogy has been narrated by one of the characters, and it's actually all the books at tomes he's been writing the whole time. And it feels like, you use the term arse pull again, Matan, it feels like another arse pull. You're like, oh, I have to now retroactively look at the other two books I enjoyed written in the hand of this character the whole time, and that actually makes it worse for me. I actually now don't like any of the books because of how it did that. It reverse engineered this narration framework over it. So yeah, that's 3 examples of Ali's complaining about books she didn't like. Or how the story was broken.
And I feel
Ali,
like
I'm just gonna say, if you become a bestseller, you might know these people.
I know, right? I have to then hang
you
out.
might meet them.
Damn.
Like, and Radford's gonna come for you.
Yeah, he
Radford,
will
if you're
come for
listening,
anyone, so I have to gird myself for that.
If I'm in that book launch too, just remember that I had your back.
I felt you in that second one, especially because it's like, yeah, as an author, you can write whatever story you want. And then, yeah, it's like at the end, it's like, yeah, you did that thing. You wrote that story. And then, it just depends on, did your reader have a good time? And does that matter to you? Or did you want to tell this story? And that's fair play as well. I'm just going to throw out really quick my example, and maybe I'll get to this in another Precipice Fiction episode, and I'll just leave it as Precipice lore, and we'll see if we ever circle back to it. My example of story breaking that really irked me was Hunter x Hunter, the anime, and I'll just leave it at that.
Ooh,
we'll see if it
okay.
riles anyone up. Yeah.
That's it?
Yeah, that's right, Matan. Tune in next time to Prose and Cons.
I hate when they do it.
And yeah, but I also do want to do an episode just on fan fiction, as well as fan fiction. I'm thinking fan fiction and reading things as a sacred text, which I'll touch on. I think I touched on that in the previous episode, but I love that stuff. Anyway, that brings us to about an hour, maybe a little bit over an hour. I don't know. James, I think you have a quote for us.
Indeed. And I'm pronouncing this author's name as Lao Tzu, and I apologize if that's the incorrect pronunciation, but the quote is, "A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step," by Lao Tzu, I believe. And I think that our relevance for that quote was, what's the significance of the 11th step if we forgot to mention the first 10?
Deep.
Boom. Precipice out. Think about that one. Anyway, well, that will do it for us this time. Thank you all for listening. Talk to you later. Goodbye.
Thank you, Phoenix.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Ciao.
You're listening to Pros and Cons, a Precipice Fiction podcast.